2.7 tons of copper in just one wind turbine, around 4.5 tons in a 1 megawatt solar plant, and 88 kilograms in an electric car, as much as 4 times as much as in an internal combustion car. We prove that it is possible to maintain harmony between industrial activity and environmental protection and care for the local community. We look boldly to the future. In line with our strategy, we aim to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We invest in environmentally friendly technologies to reduce emissions and energy consumption. Over the next 6 years, we will aim to meet 50% of our energy needs from our own sources, including RES, by focusing on solar, wind and hydrogen power. We know that we have obligations to future generations. Every year, we conduct campaigns aimed to plant several 100,000 new forest trees and shrubs. We engage in activities for the benefit of animals by creating special breeding sites for endangered species, including the peregrine falcon. We are proud of our commitment to sustainable development. We believe the future is made of copper.
A part of giving back what we have borrowed from society and nature. We have a vision to be the most climate-friendly and respected metal supplier in the world. Through our sustainability parks, we can enhance biodiversity. The keywords for Boliden's sustainability parks are responsible, playful, innovative, and accessible. Boliden works according to a priority order to create biological diversity. Avoid harm, minimize what cannot be avoided, restore nature when operations cease, ecological compensation. The sustainability parks showcase the site's history and our involvement. We are aware of the industry's effect, but we are ready to turn it around. Everyone can do something for the nature. What can you do?
For us, sustainability is more than just a word. It's at our core. It's a belief that what we leave behind matters more than what we take. It's the support for educational opportunities, so the next generation can keep learning. It's knowing that our strength comes from our diversity, that investing into communities gives all of us the chance to grow. It's about working together towards a common vision and letting everyone know our doors are always open. It's the paving of new roads, so we all have a way of getting home safely. It's making sure our air is clean, our waterways are protected, and the soil we depend on can still grow our food. It's the care we put into every action, every step, and every smile that says today is only as good as the tomorrow we build. From the moment we break ground to the planting of every tree. In our world, finding ways to make it more sustainable is what we do every single day.
I wish the world could understand the critical role that mining plays in the green energy transition. To put things in perspective, an electric-powered vehicle requires 6 times the metals and minerals of a traditional combustion vehicle. Or an onshore wind turbine requires 9 times the amount of metals and minerals per kilowatt produced as a traditional gas-powered power plant. To achieve our objectives of 100% renewable energy, it would mean taking or extracting from Earth, over the course of the next 20 years, the same amount of copper that we have mined since the history of humanity. It requires mining, but it also requires mining to be done sustainably. For us at FL Smith, sustainability means a combination of not just the environmental impacts, but additionally engagement with communities and fair labor practices. When we combine these things, we can deliver on sustainable mining. At the same time, our commitment is to our Mission Zero program, which has the goal to enable a net zero emissions mine by 2030. We're well along the way. At the same time, day in and day out, we are combining our process optimization know-how with our service capabilities and our digital offering to enable the most sustainable mining possible, all with the goal of empowering the world's transition to a green energy future.
The KGHM is engaged in the extraction and processing of valuable natural resources. We're one of the leaders in copper and silver production. Metals with the KGHM mark have for years been synonymous with the highest quality that is appreciated and recognized worldwide. We operate globally, but our heart beats in Poland, in Lower Silesia, home to Europe's largest copper deposit. We believe in a future based on copper, a key raw material for the energy transition. Energy, automotive, electronics and construction, these industries are all linked by copper, a durable, efficient and perfectly conductive metal, ideal for creating a modern and sustainable world. There are around 4.7 tons of copper in just one wind turbine, around 4.5 tons in a 1 megawatt solar plant, and 88 kilograms in an electric car, as much as 4 times as much as in an internal combustion car. We prove that it is possible to maintain harmony between industrial activity and environmental protection and care for the local community. We look boldly to the future. In line with our strategy, we aim to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We invest in environmentally friendly technologies to reduce emissions and energy consumption. Over the next 6 years, we will aim to meet 50% of our energy needs from our own sources, including RES, by focusing on solar, wind and hydrogen power. We know that we have obligations to future generations. Every year, we conduct campaigns aimed to plant several 100,000 new forest trees and shrubs. We engage in activities for the benefit of animals by creating special breeding sites for endangered species, including the peregrine falcon. We are proud of our commitment to sustainable development. We believe the future is made of copper.
A part of giving back what we have borrowed from society and nature. We have a vision to be the most climate-friendly and respected metal supplier in the world. Through our sustainability parks, we can enhance biodiversity. The keywords for Boliden's sustainability parks are responsible, playful, innovative, and accessible. Boliden works according to a priority order to create biological diversity. Avoid harm, minimize what cannot be avoided, restore nature when operations cease, ecological compensation. The sustainability parks showcase the site's history and our involvement. We are aware of the industry's effect, but we are ready to turn it around. Everyone can do something for the nature. What can you do?
For us, sustainability is more than just a word. It's at our core. It's a belief that what we leave behind matters more than what we take. It's the support for educational opportunities, so the next generation can keep learning. It's knowing that our strength comes from our diversity, that investing into communities gives all of us the chance to grow. It's about working together towards a common vision and letting everyone know our doors are always open. It's the paving of new roads, so we all have a way of getting home safely. It's making sure our air is clean, our waterways are protected, and the soil we depend on can still grow our food. It's the care we put into every action, every step, and every smile that says today is only as good as the tomorrow we build. From the moment we break ground to the planting of every tree. In our world, finding ways to make it more sustainable is what we do every single day.
I wish the world could understand the critical role that mining plays in the green energy transition. To put things in perspective, an electric-powered vehicle requires 6 times the metals and minerals of a traditional combustion vehicle. Or an onshore wind turbine requires 9 times the amount of metals and minerals per kilowatt produced as a traditional gas-powered power plant. To achieve our objectives of 100% renewable energy, it would mean taking or extracting from Earth, over the course of the next 20 years, the same amount of copper that we have mined since the history of humanity. It requires mining, but it also requires mining to be done sustainably. For us at FL Smith, sustainability means a combination of not just the environmental impacts, but additionally engagement with communities and fair labor practices. When we combine these things, we can deliver on sustainable mining. At the same time, our commitment is to our Mission Zero program, which has the goal to enable a net zero emissions mine by 2030. We're well along the way. At the same time, day in and day out, we are combining our process optimization know-how with our service capabilities and our digital offering to enable the most sustainable mining possible, all with the goal of empowering the world's transition to a green energy future.
The KGHM is engaged in the extraction and processing of valuable natural resources. We're one of the leaders in copper and silver production. Metals with the KGHM mark have for years been synonymous with the highest quality that is appreciated and recognized worldwide. We operate globally, but our heart beats in Poland, in Lower Silesia, home to Europe's largest copper deposit. We believe in a future based on copper, a key raw material for the energy transition. Energy, automotive, electronics and construction, these industries are all linked by copper, a durable, efficient and perfectly conductive metal, ideal for creating a modern and sustainable world. There are around 4.7 tons of copper in just one wind turbine, around 4.5 tons in a 1 megawatt solar plant, and 88 kilograms in an electric car, as much as 4 times as much as in an internal combustion car. We prove that it is possible to maintain harmony between industrial activity and environmental protection and care for the local community. We look boldly to the future. In line with our strategy, we aim to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We invest in environmentally friendly technologies to reduce emissions and energy consumption. Over the next 6 years, we will aim to meet 50% of our energy needs from our own sources, including RES, by focusing on solar, wind and hydrogen power. We know that we have obligations to future generations. Every year, we conduct campaigns aimed to plant several 100,000 new forest trees and shrubs. We engage in activities for the benefit of animals by creating special breeding sites for endangered species, including the peregrine falcon. We are proud of our commitment to sustainable development. We believe the future is made of copper.
A part of giving back what we have borrowed from society and nature. We have a vision to be the most climate-friendly and respected metal supplier in the world. Through our sustainability parks, we can enhance biodiversity. The keywords for Boliden's sustainability parks are responsible, playful, innovative, and accessible. Boliden works according to a priority order to create biological diversity. Avoid harm, minimize what cannot be avoided, restore nature when operations cease. Ecological compensation. The sustainability parks showcase the site's history and our involvement. We are aware of the industry's effect, but we are ready to turn it around. Everyone can do something for the nature. What can you do?
For us, sustainability is more than just a word. It's at our core. It's a belief that what we leave behind matters more than what we take. It's the support for educational opportunities, so the next generation can keep learning. It's knowing that our strength comes from our diversity, that investing into communities gives all of us the chance to grow. It's about working together towards a common vision and letting everyone know our doors are always open. It's the paving of new roads, so we all have a way of getting home safely. It's making sure our air is clean, our waterways are protected, and the soil we depend on can still grow our food. It's the care we put into every action, every step, and every smile that says today is only as good as the tomorrow we build. From the moment we break ground to the planting of every tree. In our world, finding ways to make it more sustainable is what we do every single day.
I wish the world could understand the critical role that mining plays in the green energy transition. To put things in perspective, an electric-powered vehicle requires 6 times the metals and minerals of a traditional combustion vehicle. Or an onshore wind turbine requires 9 times the amount of metals and minerals per kilowatt produced as a traditional gas-powered power plant. To achieve our objectives of 100% renewable energy, it would mean taking or extracting from Earth, over the course of the next 20 years, the same amount of copper that we have mined since the history of humanity. It requires mining, but it also requires mining to be done sustainably. For us at FL Smith, sustainability means a combination of not just the environmental impacts, but additionally engagement with communities and fair labor practices. When we combine these things, we can deliver on sustainable mining. At the same time, our commitment is to our Mission Zero program, which has the goal to enable a net zero emissions mine by 2030. We're well along the way. At the same time, day in and day out, we are combining our process optimization know-how with our service capabilities and our digital offering to enable the most sustainable mining possible, all with the goal of empowering the world's transition to a green energy future.
The KGHM is engaged in the extraction and processing of valuable natural resources. We're one of the leaders in copper and silver production. Metals with the KGHM mark have for years been synonymous with the highest quality that is appreciated and recognized worldwide. We operate globally, but our heart beats in Poland, in Lower Silesia, home to Europe's largest copper deposit. We believe in a future based on copper, a key raw material for the energy transition. Energy, automotive, electronics and construction, these industries are all linked by copper, a durable, efficient and perfectly conductive metal, ideal for creating a modern and sustainable world. There are around 4.7 tons of copper in just one wind turbine, around 4.5 tons in a 1 megawatt solar plant, and 88 kilograms in an electric car, as much as 4 times as much as in an internal combustion car. We prove that it is possible to maintain harmony between industrial activity and environmental protection and care for the local community. We look boldly to the future. In line with our strategy, we aim to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We invest in environmentally friendly technologies to reduce emissions and energy consumption. Over the next 6 years, we will aim to meet 50% of our energy needs from our own sources, including RES, by focusing on solar, wind and hydrogen power. We know that we have obligations to future generations. Every year, we conduct campaigns aimed to plant several 100,000 new forest trees and shrubs. We engage in activities for the benefit of animals by creating special breeding sites for endangered species, including the peregrine falcon. We are proud of our commitment to sustainable development. We believe the future is made of copper.
A part of giving back what we have borrowed from society and nature. We have a vision to be the most climate-friendly and respected metal supplier in the world. Through our sustainability parks, we can enhance biodiversity. The keywords for Boliden's sustainability parks are responsible, playful, innovative, and accessible. Boliden works according to a priority order to create biological diversity. Avoid harm, minimize what cannot be avoided, restore nature when operations cease, ecological compensation. The sustainability parks showcase the site's history and our involvement. We are aware of the industry's effect, but we are ready to turn it around. Everyone can do something for the nature. What can you do?
For us, sustainability is more than just a word. It's at our core. It's a belief that what we leave behind matters more than what we take. It's the support for educational opportunities, so the next generation can keep learning. It's knowing that our strength comes from our diversity, that investing into communities gives all of us the chance to grow. It's about working together towards a common vision and letting everyone know our doors are always open. It's the paving of new roads, so we all have a way of getting home safely. It's making sure our air is clean, our waterways are protected, and the soil we depend on can still grow our food. It's the care we put into every action, every step, and every smile that says today is only as good as the tomorrow we build. From the moment we break ground to the planting of every tree. In our world, finding ways to make it more sustainable is what we do every single day.
I wish the world could understand the critical role that mining plays in the green energy transition. To put things in perspective, an electric-powered vehicle requires 6 times the metals and minerals of a traditional combustion vehicle. Or an onshore wind turbine requires 9 times the amount of metals and minerals per kilowatt produced as a traditional gas-powered power plant. To achieve our objectives of 100% renewable energy, it would mean taking or extracting from Earth, over the course of the next 20 years, the same amount of copper that we have mined since the history of humanity. It requires mining, but it also requires mining to be done sustainably. For us at FL Smith, sustainability means a combination of not just the environmental impacts, but additionally engagement with communities and fair labor practices. When we combine these things, we can deliver on sustainable mining. At the same time, our commitment is to our Mission Zero program, which has the goal to enable a net zero emissions mine by 2030. We're well along the way. At the same time, day in and day out, we are combining our process optimization know-how with our service capabilities and our digital offering to enable the most sustainable mining possible, all with the goal of empowering the world's transition to a green energy future.
The KGHM is engaged in the extraction and processing of valuable natural resources. We're one of the leaders in copper and silver production, Metals with the KGHM mark have for years been synonymous with the highest quality that is appreciated and recognized worldwide. We operate globally, but our heart beats in Poland, in Lower Silesia, home to Europe's largest copper deposit. We believe in a future based on copper, a key raw material for the energy transition. Energy, automotive, electronics and construction, these industries are all linked by copper, a durable, efficient and perfectly conductive metal, ideal for creating a modern and sustainable world. There are around 4.7 tons of copper in just one wind turbine, around 4.5 tons in a 1 megawatt solar plant, and 88 kilograms in an electric car, as much as 4 times as much as in an internal combustion car. We prove that it is possible to maintain harmony between industrial activity and environmental protection and care for the local community. We look boldly to the future. In line with our strategy, we aim to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We invest in environmentally friendly technologies to reduce...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this event, From Resources to Resilience, unpacking the role of raw materials for security, sustainability and prosperity. As some of you may already know, my name's David Rose. For those of you that don't, it's very nice to meet you. Apologies for that wake-up call. That wasn't what we planned. I'll be guiding you through the next 90 minutes of, I hope, very focused debate today to take us through to the networking dinner at 6 o'clock. So what's on our agenda today? Well, we have 2 clear steps we're going to follow. First, I'll be interviewing Commission Vice President Šefčovič to get his framing for our discussions, and then we'll be bringing up our panel to dig deeper into these key issues around raw material responsibly in a necessary way that's ready to deliver. So let me just frame things myself by just giving you a few highlights from the recently released Euromines manifesto, which came out last week. So the concept is a clear one. We obviously have a decision to make. Some will say we've already made it. Which path do we follow for responsible raw materials? Well, I think we know what the choice is. One pathway really does mean turning a blind eye. It means we accept higher imports, lower ESG compliance, lower strategic autonomy, lower resilience. Clearly, this is not a path that any of us choose to follow. We choose to follow the path on the right, but let's be clear about what it actually means. Not just in terms of plan, but delivery of plan. The manifesto is clear. If we want to hit the 2030 targets in the CRMA, we're going to need 20 to 30 new strategic mine projects by 2030. Now, when I first started talking on stage in Brussels about 2030 quite some years ago, many of you will remember too. You were in the same discussions. It was a long way away. But it's getting a lot closer, a lot quicker, isn't it? So our pathway is clear. There are 3 clear ways in the manifesto about how we can strengthen our raw materials supply. It's about enabling and maintaining, growing and investing, and above all, also being responsible. Enabling and maintaining is all about our social license to operate, from unlocking our exploration potential through to innovating operational efficiency. The growing and investing is about that competitive framework we've all touched upon before in our discussions. It's about the right conditions for growth, right through to monitoring and also being agile in how we react to international competition and we foster innovation. And last but by no means least, it's Europe's real USP, unique selling point when it comes to extraction in Europe. It's about recognizing our operational ESG excellence, because we have this. It's ours. We've had it for a long time, and we need to unlock it fully. So it's about fostering dialogue, because we know that there's the social acceptance barrier to overcome, about making a case for why we need to do this and do it well, with a number of other elements involved. You have an overview of the manifesto on your seat. The manifesto is available also for download from Euromines, so do take a look if you haven't already. So, within the manifesto, it also outlines 6 steps. It's not about just saying what we need, but offering a plan about how we can achieve it, of course. We don't just bring the issues, but the solutions we hope to. And there are 6 steps to Europe's resilience from the Euromines' point of view. 1, first of all, it's about having that executive vice president from day 1 of the next mandate, responsible for industry. It's about a comprehensive policy, and this links in, of course, with the Antwerp Declaration, with over 1,000 signatures already, about delivering an ambitious EU industrial deal, which maintains our environmental objectives. It's about think raw materials, checking that against current and future legislation to unlock delivery. It's about an industry-centric policy review. It's about a retroactive review so we can balance competing priorities. Let's not pretend they're not there. It's about competitive framework conditions. And last but not least, it's obviously about increased access to finance. Not just about volume, but about availability and about ease of access. So that's an overview of the key points in the Euromines manifesto that brings some input into our debate today. So about our debate today, as I mentioned, we'll have our keynote interview in just a moment. Then we'll rapidly move into our debate, where we touch upon these different issues I've talked about. But we really want to touch upon them, not redefining issues we are all familiar with, but really looking at what is not the elephant in the room, but the need we all have, the shared objective about delivering on the goals of the CRMA in a way that works and by 2030 and made in Europe. So with that in mind, can we have a very warm round of applause, please, for Maroš Šefčovič, the Executive Vice President of the European Commission. So here we are again. So I've got a series of questions to put to you to frame our discussions a little bit, to get things started, if I can. So the first one's a little bit of an easy ball for you to hit, in a sense, I suppose. Bearing in mind, obviously, where we are with the discussions, where we are at this stage of the mandate of this commission, what are the priority messages that you want to give the mining and raw materials community here in the room to kick off our discussions today?
I think that first and foremost, I would start even with a more general message, because I think it's very important to underline it. That the political leaders in the European Union, the leaders of the EU institutions have a very clear message for all industrialists. We want the industry in Europe not only to stay, but to prosper, to develop, and we are ready to fight for it. And therefore, I think that what you will see tonight, tomorrow, will be a very strategic discussion among the leaders on competitiveness, which would, of course, feed into the process where the new political guidelines and new political framework will be developed. And I saw that you already invented a new job for, for one of the vice presidents. But it's quite clear that the competitiveness and the industrial policy would be absolutely at the top of the agenda. But I know that you are going to discuss the critical raw materials, and the lineup in the panel is excellent. I see the Anna Michel is here, who was absolutely crucial to get the Critical Raw Materials Act through the Parliament. Kerstin, together with Pete, have been working very hard in the Commission to put this new framework and this new thinking about the critical raw materials on the college table, and then been working, of course, with our partners in the Parliament to make it happen. And I know how much Robbie did for the critical raw materials, I would say new appreciation in the United States, and now he's bringing these ideas here to Europe. So what is going to happen in the next few weeks? So we will see that the Critical Raw Materials Act will start or will enter into force at the beginning of May. Already in a few weeks' time after that, we want to have the first board meeting, which will be kind of running the implementation of the Critical Raw Materials Act. And we will immediately also start with the first call for the projects. So if you have a good projects, and I know many of you in the room, I know that you have them, so just put in your calendar that on 30th of April we'll do the info day, how to apply, how to register, how to be part of this first call, because we want to start very quickly to list the most promising projects which we would have in the European Union, so we can give them the seals of being strategic project for Europe, which would allow us then to work together on feasibility studies, to look together for funding, for financing, and of course to work with all the national governments to make sure that the permitting will use this overriding public principle approach, and will get the permitting much faster than usual, because we know that without critical raw materials, we will not build our climate neutral future. I think that's as clear as that. For any future-oriented technologies, you need access to these critical raw materials. We know that we are ready to work with the industry, with our member states to deliver that.
Okay, crystal clear. I pick up from you a clear aim, a clear statement about ambition. You mentioned that you want the industry to stay and prosper here in Europe, and you're prepared to fight for that, which leads me to my second question, and it links in a little with what I presented at the beginning. Is the Commission ready then, in its next mandate, in your opinion, to adopt that bold new industrial policy?
I'm absolutely sure of that, and I think, I never seen such a, let's say, in a positive sense, agitation about the programming of the next Commission, and I'm here already for quite some time. So, I mean, tomorrow the leaders will go through the Enrico Letta report, which is very much focused on the single market, where we lack the ambition, where we should do more, and it's very much focused on the industrial ambition. And he's kind of highlighting the fact that especially in the areas where we believed in the past that it's best to leave them with the member states like energy, telecommunication, or health, we've been kind of pushed through this last two crises into, I would say, new approach to how to deal with this crisis, because it was quite clear that we would never be able to procure, the vaccines at the quantity and speed if we do it individually in every member state. The same goes for energy. We would never make it through the most severe energy crisis in 70s if we wouldn't work together. And of course, if you look at telecommunications, how many operators we have in each of our member states, and I think 52 major just in the European Union, comparing to 3 or 4 in China and US. So it's very clear that we have to scale up. That's our, I would say, major challenge. And when I was listening to the speech of Mario Draghi, who was making to the social partners, he's calling for radical change. And he's calling also for making sure that the competitiveness industry kind of realignment of our social policies with our climate ambitions and competitiveness must simply come as a top priority for the next Commission. And I think that the discussion of the leaders tomorrow and all the, I would say, preparatory steps to get a new lineup of commissioners to start working, I believe, at the end of this year will clearly reflect this ambition, which is so present in any political debate I'm attending right now.
No, very clear comments from your side. But I'll come back, if I can, just very slightly to this idea that the manifesto asks, as many other stakeholders do, for that signal from the Commission side at the beginning of the next mandate, through that role of an Executive Vice President, through that new Industrial Act. Is that something that we consider to be a possibility or a probability?
I think it's, I would say it's probable a possibility, yeah? Or possible probability.
Hold on a minute. Is that clear, ladies and gentlemen?
You are talking to the career diplomat of the past, so
I know.
No, but I mean to be crystal clear, I think it's very clear that if you look at the speeches of the President of the Commission, if you listen to all the presidencies, the prime ministers, and I would say to talk of the, political and business leaders across Europe, it's obvious that what the expectation is from the not only political elites but also from the captains of the industry, from farmers' community, for the citizens. It's very clear that we cannot somehow be in the situation that we would be kind of losing our position to be among the top most important world economies. And then it's clear that over the last decade, we lost some of this position. We're still biggest single market. We're still the biggest destination for the investments. But we also feel that if it comes to the future-oriented technologies, access to the critical raw materials, skills, size of our market, that on all this we have to have, I would say, a much more strategic approach than we had in the past, because we are again in the world where size matters, where we see that the major economic powers are ready for very, I would say, rough ride, and that international trade and political competition is very, very fierce. And I think all this led also to the approach of European open strategic autonomy, which clearly is going into the direction that we just simply have to be ready for very important choices. And I think that will be there. I expect that this would be absolutely crystal clear mandate, which the new political representation gets from the leaders of the European Union, be it European Council or I believe the new leadership in the European Parliament.
Okay. Allow me a reflection, if I may. Let me play devil's advocate very slightly, recognizing, of course, your diplomatic shield, but I shall try and breach it. So, obviously, many people in the room have heard, not in this commission, in previous commissions, have seen a lot of great work. That rapid delivery of the Critical Raw Materials Act, commendable. Strong action in building partnerships through the Global Gateway and working to make partnerships with others. But at the same time, some in the room may reflect and think, well, we've heard ambition statements before. But as you've mentioned now, it's time for more radical action, that strong alignment. And so the fear of some might be, well, okay, but we've heard these types of messages in the past, but we still are here now talking about the need to deliver. What reassurance would you offer there?
I think that the situation is totally different than in the past. I mean, let's look at the beginning of the last commission. I mean, we had relatively good economic time. We've been growing. There was strong support for the climate policies, and we presented very ambitious outlook what we would like to accomplish, so-called twin, green, and digital transition. Of course, at that time, and I still remember very well, it was in December. We didn't know that already in February, March, we'll be locking ourselves into our apartments because of COVID-19. At that time, nobody could believe that we would have war again on our continent, and that actually two wars will be so close to our borders, and we would go through the fiercest of the energy prices crisis, bringing back the inflation which was in Europe and in Eurozone unheard of. So I think that with all this, what I'm saying is that we have to give a lot of credit to European businesses and to European economy because they have proven enormous resilience. That the fact, you know, I was just reviewing the figures this morning that we have highest employment rate, lowest unemployment rate. Our problem is labor shortage and the skills. Despite of all this, I mean, so it just proves that, you know, the Europe has a very, very resilient economy. But what is new is that the global level playing field has changed. We don't see, you know, by how much the China is funding and financing its overcapacities, and because they are really blocked from the US market, they're trying to kind of bring everything over here to Europe. I had very open discussions with our American partners so that if it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act, I understand its importance for the US economy, but for us, it couldn't come at the worst possible time when we've been really struggling with how to make sure that we would accommodate the millions of Ukrainian refugees going through the enormous energy crisis where we are paying through the roof for also the energy supplies coming from United States. And at the same time, our imperative and focus we put on the clean and green tech development in Europe suddenly was also lured by the United States. So what I want to say is that simply we are in totally different ball game if it comes to the global level playing field. And I think this is pushing us for what Mario Draghi calls need for radical action, what I'm calling as a need to adjust our trade, our competition, also our environmental policies, because we really have to look at it from the perspective where we are right now, where we could be in 5 years, and just to remind ourselves that we could not afford another photovoltaic panel storage happening in Europe in any of the technologies which are so crucial for the future of the European economy. And I think this is kind of driving the top political forces, focusing their mind and being very clear, I would say, with all of us in the European Commission, bring the proposals, how you want to achieve the change, and I'm sure that the pointers will be given already tomorrow after the European heads of states and government will have their first, I would say, very thorough brainstorming on what they expect should be focus of the work of the European Union in the next 5 years. And I got my very good, I would say, taste what industry needs in the 9 clean transition dialogues we just concluded last week. Kerstin was in many of them with me, and you hear it very clearly from the industry. We need cheaper energy, we need access to the critical raw materials, we need less bureaucracy, we need a global level playing field, and we need what is, I would say, overarching principle to create business case for the clean tech and green tech. We need to create business case for the European Green Deal, and I think that's our common task to accomplish that.
Very clear. Okay. Now, I'll make a link with the US there. You mentioned your dialogue with US partners, of course. And security, we know, is a predominant factor in US industrial policy. Are there any lessons we as Europe not can copy, it's not our role to do so, but any lessons we can learn from that aspect about adapting some of the things our American partners have already done with the IRA, adapting to our needs in Europe, personalizing to our reality, whether it's on security or other areas?
Absolutely. I think when I'm talking about creating the business case for the European Green Deal, clean tech and green tech, I think that we should work much better with the green premium. We should work much better with the public procurement. Just to put it in a plain words, I think that if you are a European business which makes its production with very low carbon footprint sustainably, and you treat your workforce decently, I'm absolutely convinced that you should be rewarded for what you do, also in a public procurement. And then we shouldn't do, as Mario Draghi was pointing out again yesterday, to do 80% of our public procurement outside of the European Union. Who else does it? If in the United States you want to manufacture this very famous yellow school bus, I'm not talking about the arms, 80% must be local content. Can you imagine that we would be allowed as a European companies to do some really serious public procurement bids in China? It's forbidden. It's very clear. So what I want to say is that we have to find a way how the price shouldn't be the only criterion in a public procurement. We have to reward low carbon footprint, sustainability, decent treatment of the workers, and I think we already started with that in our battery regulation, in our package for the wind energy, where we clearly highlighted that for us sustainability, carbon footprint, and I would say the social aspect of doing business will be very, very important. Public procurement, for your information, it means 2 trillion euros per year. It's 14% of the GDP, and I believe that this is very important source how we can fund some of the, I would say, transitional technologies, because for many of the products we would be discussing, we need to create a market. We need to create a market for green hydrogen. We need to create a better market also for electric vehicles, and for many of these technologies which we know we need to have in Europe if you want to be on par with the two big economies in the world. But you need to create lead markets. You need to help these markets to be formed, and I think that's the role where European, national, public, I would say, sphere, of course, always together with the regional authorities, have to work much closely with the industry, with businesses, and of course with financial institutions to make it happen.
Yeah, it's about using procurement as one of those low-hanging tools, if you like,
Absolutely.
To help create those lead markets, which transitions me on to my final question for our interview. Now, look, I think we all know here in the room, you know yourself very well, how important policy coherence is. We all know the efforts that are invested day after day, year after year, at the European level in trying to ensure that policy coherence. But any complex package of legislation like the Green Deal, with the Critical Raw Materials Act and all its other components, there's always that risk of elements not of blocks or contradictions, but minor elements or more major elements of incoherence that can be detrimental to the aims that we urgently need to deliver on. So with that in mind, the Euromines manifesto talks about the idea of a horizontal debottlenecking legislation to really focus on and help iron out some of these remaining discrepancies between different policy areas. There's classic examples like the water regulation in respect to extraction activities, and there are others as well. With raw materials, we also have chemicals policy in raw materials, as you know. So do you see the need for such a debottlenecking legislation? And if so, how do you think that would work?
Absolutely, and I can tell you that each one of these clean transition dialogues, and I would say the meetings with the different sectors of the industries, because I mean we are now really meeting all the sectors which are in one way or another impacted by the green transition. We always try to do it together with social partners, of course, with NGOs, always part of this meeting, and I'm sure that they can testify that each of these meetings I am concluding with one request. Tell us where you believe that we are asking you to do something which is technologically impossible. Show us where you see the inconsistencies or incoherence in our legislation, or tell us where you see that simply what we're asking you is so bureaucratic from the point of view of reporting, and I'm getting the stories about hundreds of thousands of geolocators if it comes to deforestation policies, or hundreds of thousands of little points at different gas production facilities to spot the methane leakage. And what I think we need to do, and we already created, I would say, special channel for that, and this I'm doing a little bit advertisement for that, where you can report it already now to the Commission, all of these sorts of the complaints, and I can promise you that we'll be looking at them, and I think that we would have to address them one by one. I heard in one of our discussions the idea to have some kind of gigantic omnibus where we will take care of all the problems. It will not work. I think we have to go sector by sector, work very consistently with the industry, social partners, NGOs, and to simply where it needs to be recalibrated, where it needs to be put in more coherence, where it needs to be kind of reset so we can actually achieve the goals. We have to be much more pragmatic in this regard. Sometimes in a Commission, a little bit we are defensive about what we adopted, what we are implementing, but I think if we see that simply even the best intended, legally perfect legislative act is not delivering the results, I think we just should be brave and courageous enough to say, let's have a look again, let's reset it in a way that it will actually bring us the results we all want.
So clear from your side then, acknowledging that that's something we need to do. Clear from your side, you see a step-by-step approach as being necessary. My last reflection on that would be one of time. I know you have to leave at a certain point yourself, but keeping an eye on the clock. Is there a risk, though, that taking that piece-by-piece approach to it, that the timeline for that might not help us deliver so effectively on our 2030 goals?
I think that, of course, the time is of the essence. I mean, every single meeting I attend, we start and end with the partners in the discussion, highlighting the sense of urgency. I think Prime Minister really got it. The fact is that we are in the year of transition, but I think in this particular case, it's a good thing, because there will be new setup of the policy guideline. There will be new, I'm sure, energetic team who will be kind of responsible for bringing it in place. There will be new European Parliament with, I believe, this sense of urgency, because they will, I'm sure, hear it in the pre-election meetings with the citizens. So I think let's use, I would say, this year for mapping out the problem, for making sure that we are spotting them, and we also have the recipes how we can address them, and then really use it in our work of bringing all what was agreed over the last 5 years through this implementation phase. I think that we kind of, if it comes especially to the green transition, I think we are kind of really touching the outer boundaries, how far we can go with the regulations. Now we need the smart implementation, we need the technological breakthroughs, and we need much more enthusiasm of the private business to go and invest, because they see it's a good opportunity, it will bring revenue, and it will make my company more competitive. And I think that would be the task we have to accomplish in the course of the next mandate of the Commission.
Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, can I sit back down now? Right, so I think we've created a frame for our panel, ladies and gentlemen, that we can build on. And so without further ado, I think it's time, in fact, to convene our panel now. We've got a good 55 minutes to dig down further into our topics. So could we have our slide for our panel on the screen, please? And I'd like to call up our panel of Anna-Michelle Asimakopoulou from the European Parliament, Kerstin Jorna. Can we have a round of applause, please? Benjamin Gallezot, representing the French government, Robbie Diamond, bringing our US-EU perspective, and last but not least, the Euromines president, Jan Moström, also CEO of LKAB. So, let's make ourselves comfortable, and let's dig down.
My pleasure.
I'll just give a moment for that magic water and other things that we need. So, let's kick things off. We'll go European Parliament, European Commission. Benjamin, I'll come to you. And then Robbie, you, and then last but not least, Jan will come to you. So our focus here then, obviously, as we said, is about unpacking the role of raw materials for security, sustainability, and prosperity. So building a little what we just heard in our interview, I'd like to open up for your initial comments on this theme, with a focus also, as we mentioned, and a link perhaps with some of the points I raised about the earlier manifesto as well. So Anna-Michelle, over to you first, please.
Thank you. I could start with a host of things, but I could say China, I could say de-risking versus decoupling, I could say resilient supply chains, I could say Green Deal, Industrial Deal, but I'm conscious of the fact that, first of all, I'm on a very distinguished panel with distinguished organizers, and I thank you for the invitation, and I'm also addressing a very high-level, distinguished audience. So, as a politician, I'd like to focus on one thing, which is, if I can't explain why mining leads to sustainability in Europe to my next door neighbor, and I'm from a region in the northwest of Greece on the border with Albania, so if I can't explain to a citizen why this is relevant and important for them, then we've lost the battle. And I'm not just talking about NIMBYism. I'm talking in general. People need to understand, and Euro legal ease doesn't resonate with them. But when I tell my neighbor that they might not have a cell phone because we might not have lithium for the battery, or when I tell my neighbor that they might be paying for power more expensively if we don't have solar panels, my neighbor starts to understand. People ultimately support a Green Deal because they care about their children, and they care about the planet, and they care about the world we live in. It gets a little bit more difficult when they have to pay for the transition, but they do support the Green Deal. And people will support the Industrial Deal when we explain to them that that'll produce jobs. But ultimately what people want is a good deal for themselves. So if I were to start out with one point, and I noticed that this was the third pillar of your manifesto, where you talked about responsibility. So as a policymaker today, I'm standing in front of you and saying that we're all responsible for creating the awareness that is necessary on a tough topic. And the Critical Raw Materials Act, I think, broke a taboo. We can now say mining without being worried that we're looked at in a strange way. So my first message would be then, part of your manifesto, awareness is key, and we all have a role to play in increasing the awareness of the people of Europe.
Crystal clear. And if I can follow up briefly, so you're touching, of course, on this key issue of social license to operate. Are there, from your perspective, one or two things that we can do that are very actionable to further strengthen the case for this, as you underline, is so critically important in getting things done?
Well, you started by saying that you want an executive VP, yes? Well, we have an envoy for many things. I would say let's have a critical raw materials envoy, somebody who has a knowledge of policy making, politics, geostrategic interests, and understands the industrial perspective, but also the Commission's perspective. We keep asking the Commission to do all these new things. They're going to need some help. So I would have that concrete proposal.
Okay, crystal clear. And if I could just very briefly touch upon the financing side as well. One of the things that was noted by me about the manifesto, but is a call from many, is again about access to finance, about having the right financing in place to really unlock so we can really deliver on these goals. Do you have a perspective on that as well?
Well, politics is about money and power. And as the Americans say, sometimes you just have to put your money where your mouth is. And of course, the Critical Raw Materials Act and the strategic projects is an important first step. You mentioned it before. But ultimately, we're going to have to make sure that there's the money available, and we also have to give incentives to the private sector and to industry to invest. I'll give you one example. Gallium. Yes? Greece has production of aluminium, and it has the possibility of producing enough gallium for all of Europe. But in order for business to make that investment, they need some sort of certainty, because just like the Chinese put export controls on gallium and germanium, next day they could flood the market with it. So you have to deal with financing at all levels, OPEX, CAPEX.
Okay, very clear. Right, thank you very much. Kerstin, we'll transition on to you. Again, the same perspective, building on what we've heard so far about really unlocking the potential we've got in Europe from the extraction point of view and more. What would be your first reflections on that?
Thank you very much. I have a question to you, audience, to see if you paid attention to what the Vice President said. I have a prop to show and I have a comment. Now, my question to you is, what is the day when you can get guidelines and know more how to ask for strategic project?
Good.
Very good. You know, we are ready to rock in the Commission, pun intended, on the Critical Raw Materials Act, but you have to be ready too. So my prop to show is this. This could be a premium market for green nickel. So why do I say this? Is your off-taker point. You know, there has to be someone to want to buy these ESG-friendly, socially responsibly mined materials. And why do we zoom in on nickel? Because nickel is subject to big manipulation at the moment. There's lots of dirty nickel coming to the market via Indonesia. There's talk of price manipulation on some exchanges, and the prices have gone down like, 60%. Nobody is investing in nickel anymore because they say price volatility. That's not a business case. So, we need nickel. We know we need nickel. 300,000 tons in the EU. Stainless steel, which we need for defense, we will need more of it. Batteries, not so much for the moment, but we will need much more of it. So wouldn't it be nice if we had a market for green nickel, to quote green nickel next to nickel? Because that would be a market much more difficult to manipulate. It would give much more certainty to investors. And if we look at European consumption, we are relevant demand. If we can pull that together to go for this kind of nickel, we actually have a market, and we have a green premium market, and we could work with others who are equally suffering from what's happening at the moment. And the Critical Raw Materials Act actually has a number of elements. It provides the possibility for joint procurement. It provides a kind of obligation on companies to look at their security of supply. And if you look at the Net Zero Industry Act, it actually tells member states, when you auction or give some, or do public procurement, or you give subsidies, you could impose some non-price criteria, like that green nickel in the battery you buy for your energy storage system. So there's something to explore, and I think this is really the future of the business case. My last point I want to comment on is international. Of course, you know, we have 1,000 projects, more or less, which we are following, raw material projects in the EU, extraction, refining, recycling, but we need to work with other jurisdictions. We have partnerships that we are building at the moment with 12 countries, but, you know, going up. And these partnerships, they're not free trade agreements. These partnerships are very business, transactional business case, supply and demand. It's about bringing technology, bringing long-term offtake, bringing risk financing to the countries that have the supplies, allow them to go up the value chain, and to give security for our off-takers in the EU demand side for these markets. So, in a conclusion, we're ready to rock, but we need you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. If I could quickly follow up, Kerstin, on that. I know there's been an awful lot of work behind the scenes at the European Commission level on building these partnerships with third countries to get reliable supply to match what we also make in Europe. And we've seen a lot of memorandums of understanding, which are steps towards that. But what can we expect on the horizon in terms of rapidity of action around these partnerships we make also on a more global level?
Well, memorandum of understanding is then the political umbrella, but below, it's business cases. It's really business cases, bringing in off-takers, giving security for supply, having investors, and making it happen on a long-term basis. And, you know, it's like producing little babies. So the little babies are coming in under all these umbrellas now, and the key for us is to find the off-takers. So not only to have a discussion about the supply, but also to have a discussion about the demand. And sometimes with our regulation, battery regulation, we are framing actually the demand side, because on batteries we are saying, you know, what type of materials have to go in, the recycling. I mean, all of this requires capabilities, not only the extraction, also the refining and the recycling. So there's a real opportunity also for the countries we work with to go up the value chain.
Okay, clear. Right, thank you very much, Benjamin. We'll move on to you now. Obviously, from the perspective of France, in your role in the Prime Minister's office, I know you've got examples you want to bring of action already taken around ideas that we've already touched upon in our discussion. So I'll give the floor to you. Can you give us some insights into what you've already been doing and how you think these sorts of things can help scale up for us in Europe as well?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to mention, and I think it's very important, that there is now a large political consensus on the fact that minerals and metal are a key factor for the energy transition. It seems obvious for everybody in the room, but you know, for the general public and the political side, it was not so obvious 2 years ago. And the fact that at the European level there was a swift and quick implementation of adoption of CRM Act, I think it's a very strong message. And at the member states level in France, I would like to outline the recent declaration by our Minister of Economy, Bruno Le Maire, last Friday. He had very clear and bold terms on the importance of mining for the energy transition. That's the first point. And second point, he announced simplification for the permitting of mining, which is one subject of the Critical Raw Material Act. And this will be implemented through a law that will be presented at the Parliament in the next week. So we are implementing now the Critical Raw Material Act. In fact, we are working on that now for 2 years. So to answer your question, a few examples. First one, it's a very big project. Maybe some of you know about that. It's the biggest lithium mine project in Europe, in the center of France, run by Imerys. So we are of course, we are supporting this project, and we are in the process of the public debate and implementing and all the permitting for this project. It's a €1 billion project. It's a very huge one. It's something like 30 or 40% of lithium needs for France. So it's a clear example of what we are doing, and I assure you that it's not so easy, of course. There are local interests, there are debates, but that's a first example. Second one is geological mapping. We have restarted geological mapping. It was announced by President Macron last year. So we are in the process of, realizing all this geophysical and geochemical analysis of France. The permitting streamlining, we already had an implementation of that for factories, and as I said, we are doing it now for mines, for mine permitting. The fourth one is financing. Everybody is aware that financing is a very important point. Beginning this year, we have tax credit for projects, including mining projects. So it's a huge support for the capex of this kind of project. As you know, we are putting in place a €2 billion critical mineral fund, an equity fund, and we also have a public guarantee for banking loans for projects. So clearly, this subject of financing is very important, and we have to put some money on the table, and I hope that the European Union will also join us in this efforts through the strategic process mechanism. We also have the international policy. Together with our European colleagues, we are going all around the world to implement what you said. I mean, it's business, building of takes, bringing supply and demand together in these countries, bringing financing. So these are all examples of what we are doing, and we will continue to accelerate and develop this big effort.
It's great to see that we've already got good examples of these things being done, but we are, if I can say here, talking about one member state. From your optic, and obviously I don't want to ask you to comment on everybody else's business, but at the same time, how scalable do you think this is? This is the example of France, where there's lots of good, strong examples. But is France the average, or is France one of the front runners here?
No,
and how scalable is this?
I will not comment being the first or not. That's not the question. I think all member states are really focusing on that. Yeah. Depending on their resource, on their natural resource. Everybody has not the same natural resource, so each one has its strong and its weakness. So I think, but we have a regular discussion, and I think that all member states are really focused on this subject, and the Critical Raw Material Board will be a very good way to exchange on the good practices, on helping one another. The question of social acceptance you mentioned, we have to explain not only to the political level, but on the ground, I would say, and how to do that. We can work together on this kind of subject. We all have mining projects. The good way to make these acceptable, the good way to get higher standards, the good way to engage with the local authorities. These are subjects where we can, bring all the experience and share that with the European Commission and with other member states.
So a lot of positive momentum.
Yes.
Robbie, I'm going to come on to you now. You've heard the points we raised earlier, the interview with Vice President Šefčovič, the comments we've had from our panelists so far. Bringing that US optic that you bring as well as the European one, what are your reflections at this stage? What are you going to put forward for us?
Well, I think it's appropriate that it started raining, because I'm going to be rain on everyone's parade. No, on the positive side, where we are is light years ahead of where we were. I mean, it's incredible what has happened in a short period of time, and everyone is saying the right things, and they're putting in laws in place to do the right thing. But I'm concerned that when it comes down to it, to mine, it requires moving dirt, it requires energy, it requires water, and usually there's an indigenous problem and a community. And when we get into those, and we really start doing them, what is that opposition? You know, NIMBY, I like to call it YIMBY, yes, in my backyard, but I don't know if we're gonna get there, because we sort of live in this post-material world where no one knows where things are made, and yes, I think Anna is right, we have to tell them, but at the same time, you know, we have social media. There are other countries that don't want us to begin these types of projects are there undermining, you know, what I think are the right intentions. So I'm concerned, like, when the brass tacks happens, you know, what will happen? And, you know, in the United States too, right? There's this big IRA bill, they're spending all this money, but really there's no mines that they're willing to open. I think just Lithium Americas is the one that they've been willing to do. And so it is hard when you get there.
Okay, so you see challenges then in really getting things implemented down, if you know, really at that level. We heard earlier in the Euromines manifesto, it brings up the figure of 25 to 30 strategic mining projects in Europe by 2030 to be able to deliver on this 10% CRMA target. So am I right in understanding you think that might not be achievable in practical reality?
Well, remember, that's 10% and it's 25 to 30. You know, we have 23 million electric cars on the road in the world, and we have 1.3 billion others. And the environmental community is under the impression that we can recycle our way out of this problem. And I like to point out that we have a numerator and a denominator problem. And so, you know, it's not 25 and 30, it's hundreds that are ultimately going to happen. And what you really heard about nickel is the story. This is a structural problem. So I think the IRA, I think the money that's being spent is potentially good money after bad unless we deal with that structural problem of overcapacity. You know, we have competitors out there who do build at overcapacity, have opaque supply chains where they can undermine different parts of the project at every level, from the mining to the processing to the precursors to the actual building, and then they can share, they have unlimited budgets and can manipulate that. So we have companies in many cases that are, you know, quarter to quarter answering to that. And so I think things like the IRA, we might build a lot of important things, but then they, you know, will they hold on when the price has been plummeted because the market has flooded? So I think we not only have to do the positive things to build these things, but then we need to build the preventive measures to protect these things, and that's difficult too, because we'll have to wait to get all the solar panels we want and the batteries. You need to, you know, they're playing for keeps. We need to do the same.
Okay, so in terms of transitioning a bit from problem to solution then, what for you are the one or two priority things we've got to do to solve that? What are the actions to take and when?
Yeah, I think we need Europe, America, Canada, Australia, Japan, and Korea to get together and say, we need a transparent supply chain from the mine to the final product. We need to infuse it with human rights, labor, and environment. We don't need a global standard. I would like one, but it'll just take 20 years. We need to just all implement our current domestic standards that are similar, and we need independent inspectors to make sure that that's happening. And finally, acknowledge to our public you will probably pay more, which is that offtake problem. You know, we meet with car companies and other companies, they don't want to pay more. And when they don't really want a green premium, and they don't want a new exchange outside the LME to exchange nickel. You know, they talk about it, but in the end of the day, in the room, they're like, yeah, it's already expensive, and we can't do that. So you ask me, I think you know, the hopefulness is we have an existential problem. You know, we basically offshore these things because let them have all the dirty stuff. But in the end, we're just laundering the coal and the dirt through them. So existentially, we need to do this, which is why things have happened and happened quickly. Now we just need the backbone. And, you know, political leaders have to tell societies that haven't done this in a long time what it really takes to do it. That is where I'm kind of weary.
Okay, but I'll note that the rain stopped now.
There you go.
So signs of hope, ladies and gentlemen, signs of hope. Right, Jan, you've been obviously taking in what we've heard, and bringing the Euromines president's perspective, but also in your role as CEO at LKAB, what your company's doing in investing in Europe. What are your reflections here about what you've heard, about the challenges you face, about the ways of overcoming the challenges that you see?
I would not go back to the complexity of creating what we can call resilient value chain. We need to understand that the value chain or the Green Deal or the green transition starts with access to energy and raw material. We talk, of course, of a comprehensive industrial policy. What we talk about is a policy how to ensure that we will have cost-efficient electricity and that we will have cost-efficient raw materials. And you know, raw materials, and especially mining in Europe, is quite rare. We have for the past 3, 4, 5 decades exported all our mines out to South America, Africa, Australia. We are not familiar with mining as we was 4, 5, 6 decades ago. We have imported these materials. Now we have to regain the understanding of mining. We have to have the public acceptance. We have to have these licenses to operate. We have to understand if we want to have a competitive industry, and you know, the industry is the backbone of the union. All our prosperity lies in our ability to have a competitive industry. Then we have to have access to these materials. And I would say it will be almost impossible if we can develop a policy, an industrial policy, saying how will this be done. Otherwise, we will have all this complexity regarding electricity, regarding raw materials, as was mentioned here, with how many networks we have in each country. We don't have it if we would use the word, which I don't like, standards. How will we actually deal with all these complex value chain? A policy saying, this is the way we are going to do, this is how we are going to get access to this precious green electricity, this precious resilient raw material, metals and minerals.
Okay, so if you had 1 or 2 priority actions that you want to see and you want to see happening in the shorter, could we say almost urgent short term, what would they be?
I would say, perhaps I would quote now, I don't remember his name, Armstrong, when he went down from the Eagle in 1969, the summer, you know, it's a small step for man, but a huge step for mankind. I see the Critical Raw Material Act, something like that. I think it was mentioned here. For the first time, we actually says that this is important. It's important that we have access to these metals and minerals. I would say the most important thing now is how to implement that. We talk about 20 to 30 strategic projects. Hopefully we will have these, and we will have the process of both defining them, but also to see how they will be dealt with. One of the most important things, at least from my side, is if you get to be accepted as a strategic project, then you have, 24 months from that you put in your appeal for your environmental permit until you get an answer. And of course, the most important thing is it yes or no. But you have to deliver on the Critical Raw Material Act and deliver it fast.
Okay, clear. Have we got any reflections, Anna Michelle, Kerstin, or Benjamin, or even Robbie, from what we've heard so far? We've heard a little bit of rain, but with some positive sunshine that's hopefully, possibly coming. There's a bit yo-yo today, the weather, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? We've heard also Jan's comments too. Kerstin, please. And in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, if I can, I'll be opening up for questions in a moment. So if you've got questions, get those hands ready. Yep.
So I have 2 comments. One is, you call it YIMBY, I would call it PIMBY. You know, please, in my backyard. That's what we have to get. And I think the fact that we included waste, tailings, in the Critical Raw Material Act is a way to get to that. Because we're saying, you know, sometimes it's enough to just look at what you already have. Because we had a lot of way, because we were looking for things that we, in the past, that is not what we're looking for today. So being able to say, what we have here, we are going to use it. It's no longer a danger for you, because waste is always seen as a danger, but we can actually use it. We can build a business case on the waste as well. And in the new kind of projects, maybe there's an extraction business case and there's a tailing business case. This, I think, can help to de-dramatize the perception of the excavation and of the extraction. And my second point is that I mean, you need skills. We need skills. And Jan, I've been in Euromines in Kiruna. They are very impressive. And the skills is IT or battery robots that are. So the perception that we often have of mining is not what you actually see. And I think there's much more can be done by all the companies who are in this business to actually explain and show this. I've met recently a company, Austrian company, they're actually active in kindergardens, to show the beauty of the material and what you can do with the material. So I think there is something to do for all of us as well to get from NIMBY to PIMBY.
Okay, I'd like to bring in a new term. A few years ago, there was a beautiful cartoon about this. There's NIMBY, we want PIMBY, but right now someone says we have banana, which is build anywhere, but not anywhere near anyone. And we still need to address this. Benjamin, yeah.
I want to come back on the question Kerstin and Robbie mentioned about the structure of the market. So there are two questions. The first one is the premium market, and of course we have to, work very hard on how to, create this premium market. But the second question is the long-term market. And I think there is a political subject about that, but there is also a question, and Robbie mentioned that, of relationship between different kind of companies. I mean, building long-term contracts with floor and cap price is clearly a good way to help projects on one side with the floor and to help customer with the cap. So in principle, if we were able to arrange this kind of contracts, 10-year supply contract or 15-year supply contract with floor and with cap, completely outside the spot market which does not give long-term signal, that could be a very powerful way to support the project. But currently, there is no consensus in the industry on that. And I'm always talking with company on the mining side and on the other side, the user side, because it's my job in France to do also this kind of, and company do not agree on that. So we still have work to do to change the way the mining sector or the metal sector and the downstream sector contract together in order to facilitate this project. And it will be good for the premium, but it will be good also for the long-term price signal. And it's I think it's a very important thing we have to do. We cannot change that overnight because there are practices. Miners are used to sell on the spot markets. That's the way they do their money, or at least that's the way they think they can do their money. I think they can do also good money with long-term contracts, with floor and cap, because the volatility of the market, the way the market can be manipulated, as we saw that, is a very big problem, I think, also for the mining industry. But there is still a lot to do on that side.
Okay, clearly noted. I see you nodding a little there, Robbie.
Well, I'm always nodding. Sometimes this way, sometimes that way.
Okay.
I guess I have two quick thoughts. One is we didn't mention the defense systems we need, and I think it's really important. There's a war on this continent. There's a lot of instability in the world, and everyone's woken up that they either have to restock, rebuild, or build from scratch. And the same minerals that are in the energy transition are the same minerals that are in the military platforms. Using an American example, I like to say the Ford F-150 Lightning are the same as the F-35. So I think it's really important, and that the defense side doesn't actually need as much, and that the commercial sector through the green transition can help. And I think that's where you can talk politically to a larger group of people who might not be as enamored with the green transition. The other one I would just mention processing. You know, there are places in the world, including the United States, where we get rare earth now, and what do? We send it to China to be processed. And that will happen here too. So unless you're thinking of that side of the equation, and I think sometimes we get caught up, I know this is Euromines, so I don't want to say, but sometimes we do get caught up in the materials, the rocks we need, and we forget this other piece, and I think that it's an important piece that might even have a slightly less of negative, negative connotations.
Yeah. No, but a key point you make about the defence side as well, where volumes are lower, but criticality is just as high, indeed. I'd like to open up now. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to pose a question to our panel? If so, be bold. Get those hands up. I see one over here. Could I ask anyone, and one over here, could I ask you, please, if you don't mind, to avoid lengthy statements from the floor, just identify yourself and pose your question, please. Thanks.
Yeah, Quentin Dehul from the International Copper Association. So our members also mine copper in Europe. So we mine as much in Europe as what we import from outside of Europe as concentrate. And they have projects that are strategic to increase this. I've learned that we can learn from the wind industry to accelerate permitting because we have Critical Raw Material Act setting ambition, but we know we need to implement this at local level with capacity there. So we'd like to know whether the Commission can elaborate on what can we learn from the wind industry to accelerate permitting and social acceptance of mining. Thank you.
Okay. Kerstin, do you want to pick that one up? And we'll let the others come in as well if they need to.
Well, in fact, you have to see three acts together. Repower, setting the targets, and to deploy renewable energy to bring down the energy price, because that's really hurting our industry. But in order to deploy, you need something to deploy. And that's where the Net Zero Industry Act comes in and says if someone wants to build wind turbines or solar panels or cables or steel that's going into this or new propulsion systems, then you can get ultra-rapid permitting, ultra-rapid financing, access to skills academies, and access to the market through public procurement and non-qualitative price criteria. But if you want to produce all of this, you need raw materials, then the raw materials, the Critical Raw Materials Act comes in. And you have to see the three together. And the Critical Raw Materials Act obviously also has ultra-rapid permitting. The wind industry is a different problem. The wind industry is the problem that you get wind turbines from China and the Chinese say to you, here's my wind turbine, you don't have to pay, or pay me when you can. That's not a business model you can compete with, really. So what was happening in the wind industry is that they didn't get to bid anymore against these criteria. That we are correcting with the market, which is a bit same idea, market premium market idea. And when it comes to financing, just one example, but the wind industry could no longer bid because their balance sheets were too bad, so they wouldn't get the performance guarantee from the banks. So we developed a counter guarantee with the EIB to allow for the wind industry and that might be relevant in some of the projects, and you know, it shows we can maybe think of something to give the counter guarantee so they can do the performance guarantee and they can be part of the bidding process. That's what we can learn from the wind industry.
Okay, that covers that one. We had a question over here as well. Then I see another this way. Can we go to the gentleman at the back first, and then we'll come back over here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Golan from Vale Base Metals in Canada. We're a global producer of critical minerals. I have a request and a question, so I'm not going to say it's two questions. My request for all the panelists, can you raise your hand if you have visited a mine? Can you raise two hands if it's been off the continent of Europe? Okay, thank you. So my question is this. As far as I understand, there's no restriction on any buyer to pay a green premium, should they so choose, to buy nickel or any other critical mineral. So what information do you have that there's an industrial groundswell to pay more and from voters to pay more?
Okay, so an interesting question.
I literally said there's none. I literally said they walk into our offices, all these companies, and say, look, we're not going to pay more. And, you know, Indonesia is this perfect example. Who is it that's trying to get the free trade agreement with the United States, with Indonesia? It's the car companies. And so, you know, I think they talk a good ESG game, but they don't want to do it, and I don't think people want to pay more, which is why I think the only way you get a global race to the top is we all race together. I think that that is the most important thing. We need a structural change, you know, in this new economy where we have a country out there that has a hybrid type of system that is both uses our free market against us and uses it itself at the same time as building overcapacity. That overcapacity is not a bug in the system. It's what they've done since Mao until now, right? And you see it in every industry. So it's coming for now these industries. You had it with solar, and you know, had it with steel and aluminum and shipbuilding. And so again, I just think we have to, the fox is in the hen house.
Okay, let's hold that thought. Mao until now and the fox. We're getting very metaphorical today, ladies and gentlemen. It always happens with afternoon debates. Mornings, this never happens. So let's pick up on this, Benjamin, and perhaps Kerstin and Anna-Marie as well.
Maybe one element of answer to your question. There is a structural change for certain metals, is that now your metals, I mean you're a miner, they are going into large-scale commercial products such as car. And there is a very, very big transparency that will be put in place with the battery regulation. And there is a need for the car maker to get some, you know, some, I would say, clean or green metals. So that's a strong incentive that has to be taken into account. Now the question is, how do you certify that this nickel or this metal is green or not green? So there will be need of kind of regulatory measures that are in the CRM Act and that are a kind of, you know, incentive to put in place this green market. And we have to organize that, but it's a force that you have to take into account.
Yeah. So you see it as being there, but it needs to be it needs to be, if you like, strengthened. It needs to be brought out.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, clear. Kerstin, Anna-Marie, do you want to come in as well on that? Okay.
For me, you know, we're flexing our single market muscle on this, which you may not have. The single market muscle means we nudge off-takers to go there. Sometimes with regulation, battery regulation, because then, you know, if you want to use a battery in Europe, you just have to put it, to build it in the way, which means responsibly mined materials. We nudge through standards. You say you don't like standards, but you know they're quite a useful tool to ensure compliance with certain regulation. We nudge through public procurement, as I said. You know, non-price criteria about ESG, cyber resilience, very important in the area. And then we nudge through conversations, what Vice President Šefčovič mentioned, because if you look at a windmill, 1,000 tons of steel go into that windmill, wind turbine. The wind turbine produces green, renewable electricity. That electricity goes into electrolyzers to produce hydrogen. That hydrogen goes for a steel company to produce green steel. That green steel, should go into the wind turbine. So, you know, you need to have these conversations with everyone to create the understanding, you know, I'm the OPEX for downstream. And by having these conversations, we see more buy-in. Hybrid, green steel in Sweden. I mean, we have 50 million tons of steel in Europe, but it's only 2 for the time being. But virtually all of it has been sold to car industry because they're interested in getting that green steel. And the faster you can scale this, the cheaper it will be. So I'm not as pessimistic as you that there is no one wishing to walk into that space.
And maybe one example of what we have done. Since the beginning of this year in France, the subsidy for electrical vehicles are dependent on the CO2 content of the car, including the battery metals.
Okay. Okay, so the argument then being that we need to make this stronger, and Kerstin, it's clear from your side that it can be done. So you have the sun might come out, it's not raining approach to that, definitely. We have one more.
I can answer the...
Please do, yes.
I can answer the voter question. No, voters don't want to pay more. Unquestionably, they don't. But I'll tell you something that I think the average person, whether they vote or don't vote, understands, is that in the end, you get what you pay for. I think that's a better concept to work with to explain to people what they're getting. And people do care about the quality of what they're getting. People do care many times about the origin of what they're getting. And people do have values. I mean, if you ask somebody if they'd rather get something from a jurisdiction which doesn't have any labor laws or uses child labor or pollutes the environment, they'll tell you that they don't want to. Now, the problem is when you tell them that there's a huge price differential, the problem is how do they react? Do they turn a blind eye or don't they? Well, how do you deal with that? First of all, you explain it to them so that at least if they're going to be hypocrites, they have to be out in the open about it. And secondly, you find a way to lower the price for them, at least until you can scale up and you can find the necessary financing in order to get there. So
it's an interesting reflection. I guess you raise a hand in the room if you like a bit of chocolate sometimes, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone like me munch on a bit of chocolate, or is it only me? Yeah. Find me a chocolate bar on a shelf that doesn't say sustainably sourced cocoa these days. But 20 years ago, the discussion in that market was, no, people won't pay a premium. Yes, they do. So I would argue, we could argue, I suppose, that other sectors have done this. So maybe there's an urgency for our sectors to do this in other areas too. But doesn't it come back to social license to operate again that we've all talked about, though? Are we making the case strongly enough to people in Europe? Not just here in Brussels with discussions like this, but is there an opportunity, and I'd like to hear from all of you just quickly, is there an opportunity or a real need here to just make a better case for all of this? Because you've mentioned this idea that if people don't accept this at the local level in social license to operate, then we have a real issue here in terms of delivery. So I would like to, just a quick reflection if we can, thinking about time, but so Anna Michelle, do you see that there's a stronger case to make to people in Europe to show them why we need these things, to try and enhance this social license to operate? Because you've mentioned that voters are not aware of this, or they don't care yet, would be my comment. Not that they don't care, perhaps, but they don't care yet.
that's not true, though. They do care. They care about what they consider green. They care about being responsible. People do care. Not everybody is, so cold-blooded.
But do they view raw materials in that optic?
Oh, I'll tell you what. I heard about, I started, I'm looking at Peter Hadley, who's like a veteran in this. I started looking at critical raw materials when I first came into this mandate. And I was simply shocked when I realized that, we're planning a twin transition, which is based on this stuff, and we might not actually have it. I mean, that was just a shocking revelation for me. So we've come a long way since then, though. I mean, it's now high up on the political agenda, I can tell you. I mean, I never thought that mining because of critical raw materials would be a hot or, topic, but it is. So let's rock and roll. Let's use this momentum from the Critical Raw Materials Act to try and sensitize people to what's going on.
Okay. Benjamin, you wanted to mention something there.
Of course, this work on the ground to convince people is very important, very, very important. We know that the mining industry is doing that, and we're working very hard with Imeris to convince in the center of France, in Allier, people that this project is necessary, is good for the region, but also good for the nation and for Europe. So it takes time. I think we have to do more, we have to explain more. People are not familiar, how things are produced, so we still have some effort to do at the member state level, but also with the European Commission to explain more, even in technical aspects of how do we build this thing, how do we mine, what are the technical aspects. It's because on the ground, it's really difficult. It takes time, and takes time to convince people, and to tackle with all the technical questions. And when we're talking about permitting is basically that. Is basically giving the license to operate once you have, gone through all this process, environmental process, and social process is of course part of it.
Okay, Kerstin, thank you. Kerstin, I see you want to come in. Robbie, you signalled, and then Jan, I'll bring you in on this very quickly. Then we have a question over here as well, which I haven't forgotten about in just a moment. Okay, please.
My point is, as a mother of four, explain is good, engage is better. And I think what we need to do is engage about the jobs that are behind this, which are really very interesting and good jobs. I'm going to Leoben for the university in 2 weeks or so. It's the students we have to engage with. It's the people who make career choices. We need all of you to offer traineeships to kind of show what it actually is, and training these engineers of the future. We have too few universities, and these who are actually specialized in this, and Leoben is one example of them, and they have too few students. Okay. So they cannot even offer the curricula they should be offering. That's where we, I think, can shift the tide.
Okay, Robbie, quickly.
Yeah, I was just going to say that although I sounded like a downer, yeah, I think the number one thing is transparency. I think it is very hard to operate against opaque supply chains, and that's what happens. And especially when the supply chain creates one clean thing over here that I can send to Europe, and then a dirty thing over here, and they're just they're playing with those prices. So transparency, because this is a global problem, and if you really believe it's a global problem, you can't play whack-a-mole where you do one thing over here. I don't know if you know that game where you hit the mole and then the other one pops up. That's what we're doing at the moment. We're allowing them to play, and so that's why transparency will get to your green certified thing, but we're not quite there. And I think we need to also think about these dual tracks and make sure that we can't let them produce this one for us over here and then this one over here that's dirty, and then ultimately we don't solve the global problem.
Okay, clear point. And Jan, quick reflection from you.
Yeah, I will come back to social acceptance, because that's the crucial part of what we want to achieve. The target is not to ensure that we have 20, 30 projects to 2030. This is a long run. We have the continuous row of deposits, which means that we have to have that social acceptance, and then also got the public or the citizens in the union understand that mining is high technology today. As Kerstin said, it's not about digging a hole in the ground. It's generally state of the art regarding technology. And the tricky part for us is how can the industry and the political life go together and really make this transparent and make this understandable for the customers for our products. So I would say that is absolutely crucial, that we can get that social acceptance.
Yeah, and through that partnership.
Through that partnership, we have to be very aligned in this.
Okay, clear. So we've got a pending question, and then we'll wrap up. Please.
Thank you. Julia with Transport and Environment. I hope you can all hear me. So I have a question which is very relevant to the discussion you are having. So it's really on the case here in Europe. The problem we have is that we don't have financial support, like, for example, in the US with US IRA. And this is ultimately what you need to support this higher ESG local projects. Now, we do have a lot of financial support, public, going to the clients of them, as was just said, the clients, so battery companies, EV manufacturers. So what about as a short-term solution to try and attach a condition to source local materials, at least to some degree, when you give that public money to a battery plant or a car maker? Because ultimately, that maybe can help with some of the reticence that they have, and they want to source it locally because it's more expensive. So it's cheaper for the taxpayer. We give public money. We make it go a longer way by attaching some made in Europe conditions. Thank you.
So quick reflections on that idea of conditionality. Who wants to pick that up first?
There's so many legal questions. Nice idea, so many legal problems, no? I'll let the,
Well,
I mean, usually it's legislators who have these ideas, and then the commission comes in and says, no, we can't do that because X, Y, and Z. So
Right.
why don't we do it that
Yeah,
way?
let's bring the commission in on that quickly then. Come on.
Net Zero Industry Act, actually, that's the logic that's in Net Zero Industry Act. When you give subsidy, when you do an auction, when you do public procurement, attach conditionality to it. It's obligatory, you know, for public procurements, the 30% of non-price criteria. So that kind of works. But I believe we also need more de-risking money. It cannot only be through the offtake. There's the fund, the raw materials fund France. There's a raw materials fund in Italy. There's a raw material fund in Germany. They should work together, and I'm very happy that all these three funds actually are European. So it's about the European value chains, and tribute to that.
And Benjamin?
So first of all, what you say is not completely true, because in France, but it's the case in several member states, there are financial support for extraction and transformation project. As I mentioned, we have a tax credit, which is, by the way, not so different as what is included in IRA. Inside the European regulation framework, so it's mainly for battery and for renewable energy. So there is a question to enlarge this stated case to other kind of, I would say, object, for example, for networks. As you know, power networks need a lot of copper, so we'll have to develop copper production and copper transformation. Currently, it cannot be applied in the state aid rules. You cannot use, or aluminium, for example, you want to support an aluminium project, you cannot have the state aid rule that is available for a battery, so that's a question. On the way you mention, and as Kerstin says, there are already some elements of that. And as I said, for example, when we subsidize for the customer, for the car, it's dependent on CO2 criterion. So in a way, having the car built in Europe and with material built in Europe, you know, it's a very important factor to have low CO2 content, so it counts. Now, going all the way to, you know, reserving subsidies for car battery to things produced in Europe, we still have a way to go, but there are already some elements in the NZEA, in different kind of subject. It has to be also a question of discussion inside the industry. I mean, the regulators, the member states can do a lot of things, but I think the industry, the different parts of European industry, I mean, here we are in a Euromine, but there are also the car industry. You can have discussion with the car industry, and that's what we are trying to do in France, to connect all these different industry. So the regulator, the member state, the European Commission, we do a lot of things, but I think industry has also its responsibility and its rules. Its role, excuse me.
Okay, clear. Time to wrap up now, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll go Jan, Robbie, Benjamin, Kerstin, Anna Michelle. So takeaway comments then. Our focus is on resources to resilience and unpacking the role of raw materials for security, as we touched upon briefly, sustainability, prosperity. So what would be your key reflections or key takeaway points on this, with that optic of really being able to deliver on the goals of the Critical Raw Material Act? So that really getting things done. So Jan, I'll open up with you.
I will say, listening to what we talk about, I see that we are very aligned what's necessary. We have to be very transparent of the necessity of these materials, and we have to have this social acceptance of what to do. We also have to understand that we have an impact as consumer on actually what we are buying. Even as was mentioned here, as a voter, you do not want to pay a green premium. On the other hand, we have to realize that people generally are concerned about this. So we have to balance this complex issue, and it's transparency to make it understandable that the green value chains is based upon our access to these critical materials, and we have to increase domestic mining.
And would you have a takeaway message for European policymakers with an eye on the new mandate that's coming as well? What would be your main asks there?
I would say that, going back to what I answered earlier, the most important thing now is how to facilitate the Critical Raw Material Act and actually make it work, make it operate, see that you can pursue some strategic projects and actually see that you have an overriding public interest in some areas. We have to have the showcase or whatever we will call it. We need to see that it delivers.
Okay, clear. Robbie, on to you.
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is, like Anna Michelle said 5 years ago, this wasn't cool. So basically everyone in this room are now cool. So congratulations for that.
Speak for yourself.
Coolness caught up to us. But, you know, I guess I would say that, look, although I painted a bit of a doomy picture, but that's because the challenges in front of us are profound. And, but that being said, when we have crisis, we see people move quickly. And so I think that's our opportunity. And the most important thing besides this transparency is for people to understand what's in front of us and don't wear, you know, rose-colored glasses. And we are dealing with an economic system that's very different, both from the United States and from China and from other people. And therefore, what I'd say to Europeans is, just accept that. The world is different than the institutions we built after World War II. And I think it's time for us to build new institutions, which could be free trade, but free trade with people who are living up to those standards and a rule of law.
Okay, clear from your side. Benjamin?
I think, as I said at the beginning, I think we have a good political framework and a good political condition, and now the question is implementing and delivering. So we have to focus on that, the member state and the European Commission, and I think we agree on that. The question now is not thinking about completely new things, but mainly, you know, doing, implementing, having testing on the ground our policies, and it's really the key question for the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, clear from you. Kerstin?
I retain supply and demand. Money is nice, but it's also not enough. Supply and demand, what we need is a rock concert. And I'm sure we can organize that in Europe.
Great, so that's a new industrial VP from day one and a new industrial policy matching the ambition of the Green Deal. Duly noted. Last but not least, Anna Michelle.
Then a CRM envoy to match all that. Somebody, let's all the people that are in this room and all of us who are interested in this, let's become ambassadors of these concepts. People do understand. You just need to explain it to them. And you need to couch it in terms that touch them, that touches their lives. When you talk about safety, people understand what safety means. So you just have to use the right words.
Okay. Right. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for our panel? Shameless publicity plug. Euromines manifesto, ladies and gentlemen, do engage. I think as Kerstin said, it's not just inform, but engage. And now dinner, or refreshments outside, should I say, are officially open. Thank you very much.